It's great to be here. You know, Bertrand, I have to give a little context for those who haven't been following the StartUp Health and Novartis partnership over the last 2 years. But what's amazing is we're at the 2-year anniversary of sitting down.
True.
I think it was the Wednesday after the festival 2 years ago to talk about both you and Vas, who are pretty new to the roles of both CEO and Chief Digital Officer, about what your plans were to really reimagine Novartis for the next decade and beyond. And so as kind of a kickoff, I would love for you to kind of give a little color to that moment in time where you were coming from and where you were kind of thinking, and then we're going to talk about what you've learned over the past 2 years.
No, I remember it was 2 years ago, was pretty much my first day on the job and getting thrown into the arena of JP Morgan and without even knowing the healthcare space very well as part of it. So it has come a long way over the last 2 years, but I cherish that moment. I have to say, I always love coming here as well. Katia just brought me upstairs as well and seeing I heard 2,300 one-to-one meetings happening as well over the course of the next couple of days. It's incredible what you've built in here with StartUp Health. And candidly, I'm spending more time here in this building than I'm doing at JP Morgan itself. So this is a place.
Hearing. Thank you. So, by way of context, your background, because you're not from healthcare. You were at Amazon before. Just give a little context there, and most importantly, what you brought from the non-healthcare world to your thinking as Chief Digital Officer at Novartis.
Yeah, so my time at Amazon was a long time ago. I started there in 2003, but it was still a pretty small startup that was starting to professionalize itself in many ways. Probably the two things that I took away at the time were the absolute customer obsession and customer centricity. That's why I always love coming to those rooms, because that's what you get in spades, at least for all the ones actually finding a path. And the second piece is also the platform play, so the natural thinking about scalability from the very get-go. Even still being small at the time, it was obvious that this startup, Amazon, was meant actually to really scale at massive scale. And I think this applies to what we do in healthcare in many ways. We have way too many pilots, way too many small experiments going on, and not enough scaling. That's one of the reasons probably why we haven't cracked the code yet. So how do we equip ourselves for that? And we still have a long way to go to get to the right patient centricity or HCP centricity or nurse centricity that we will get there over the next 5-10 years together.
So on that day 2 years ago, one of your first days, what did you think you were signing up for in terms of not only taking the role, but taking it with a new team that really was going to make a much, I think, more ambitious commitment than ever before about the future of health and what Novartis and its partners and its teams were going to work on?
What attracted me to it was the fact that it was a white canvas. It was 2 years ago, you could sense, it was the time when data, digital, technology was all started to converge, and we were all trying to figure it out. But the fact that there was no playbook as such, you had seen it happening in many other industries, in retail, in entertainment, in many other spaces before, but everything was to be done here. There was a wave of freshness as well in Novartis, new team setting up with Vas taking the helm. It has been largely a new team since then as well among my colleagues. And there was really a mandate to go and make it happen across all the areas of the business, from research and development, which had specific challenges in their own right. So how do we take out a good couple of years of the time to get our drugs to market? What if on the commercial side we could get twice as many patients, twice faster, and to reach them, get them on the right drug regimen to that type of speed? And on the operational side as well, big challenges of simplification of the operation, talking about $1 billion plus of savings as well, to be able to reinvest that into R&D and commercial with the launches we had. So it felt like an irresistible type of challenge as well at the time, and certainly proved to be true.
And what would you say is your biggest either surprise or challenge over the past 2 years? If that was kind of what it was when you were bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, new on the job, what's been the biggest takeaway of the past 2 years?
Surprises. I think maybe a few. I think the first one is that pilot to scale has been a big one. And it's something that's not easy in this role, because I'm coming from an entrepreneurial background, naturally curious, naturally interested by many of the things that the room builds, and helping us, you take the 10 or 11 moonshots, how do we leverage the team here as an extension of our own team to really go after that? But at the same time, it's an industry plagued with plenty of pilots that are being reproduced all over in different countries, often doing 5, 6 times the same thing without realizing it, and we don't scale. So we get a lot of energy in the system, but then if you don't pay attention, it doesn't scale, all this effort is pretty much for nothing. So I think I would define my year one was all about getting that energy, getting the teams organized, having clarity about what we really wanted to pursue, and the big underlying platforms we wanted to get. And year two has been more about shifting that energy, now that we started to make it irreversible, into big scalable areas that we can get. I think that has been one. Two is probably still the major gap that we have in customer centricity, and it's still not in the DNA in healthcare in many ways.
Can you explain customer centricity for those who aren't familiar with how it's defined, especially within Novartis or the industry?
I think it's quite simply. It's putting yourself in the shoes of your end customers at the end of the day and building everything backwards from there. Amazon being incredibly good at that, doing the PR FAQ from fairly early on, even 5 years before it even starts, saying what does the experience look like at the very end, and then how do you assemble the team for that? I think we do incredible good things, but that's not necessarily in the DNA. And so that's where I find a natural fit between what we do and all the strengths and the muscle and the ability to internationalize and the incredibly scientific background that we have with probably a lot of the more customer centricity that we find in this room.
And so I'm assuming that it's been smooth sailing with the team since you came on board, and everything you just outlined got done without a problem or pushback from the team?
Yeah, it took some work, and we're in the thick of it right now. Yeah. Obviously, everything is still to be proved in many ways, but I think we have made some good forays. We have, for example, 12 big, what we call digital lighthouses. We talked about them with Unity last year on this stage. I'm proud to say that we have made a lot of progress on those, starting to really scale those. Those are foundational pieces that are starting to come to fruition. Long way to go, but at least we're in the game. At the same time, we have a few bold bets that we are looking into. Take, for example, our partnership with Tencent in China and how we can get to heart failure patient post-discharge, starting to really having proper MVPs and with real ambition for scale on the back of that. We have done, I would claim one of the aspirations is also to make Novartis digital. We have a long way still to go, but it's happening. It's really happening when you go on campus, you spend time with the teams. The natural appetite for data science, the appetite for partnering, the appetite to really nailing the experiences as well has really increased, and a lot of demystification. And finally, to me, the point that I'm really, and the reason I'm here and excited to be here, is how do we become a credible number one in the tech ecosystem, and or at least a real player that can contribute to what you do. And I generally view this team here and the 315 startups you have as well on within Startup Health as an extension of our team. And it goes from how do we equip ourselves to be able to be a good partner with smaller startups, with academics, all the way to last year we have announced partnership with the likes of AWS, with Microsoft, with Tencent, so to scale as well in that dimension.
So you dug into this great blog post on LinkedIn, I think it was yesterday or the day before, outlining a lot of the thinking that you've done around partnerships. I'm going to ask you the same thing I asked you about lessons. Like, what has been the biggest learning from contrasting these large partnerships with the Amazons to, there's been, I think, 11 or 12 collaborations and partnerships at the startup level with Startup Health portfolio companies. So if you kind of use that as the bookends, what's been the biggest thing you've learned on that? And some of this is in the post, but I want you to elaborate a little bit.
A few things. I think the first one is a candid realization that it's hard to work with us. We are big Novartis, 110,000 people across the globe, plenty of very matrix in many ways. So when you take that as a starting point, but we need that help deeply because we need the extension of our team in the dimension, is how do we rethink that? How do we make it much easier? How do we become much more single point of contact? So that's why we've launched the Biome. That's why we've made a partnership with Startup Health as well, with the team being even embedded within the Biome as part of it. So almost in the shoes, if my customer is a startup, my customer is a partner, how do we really rethink the relationship so it's much easier for you guys to work with us? So in terms of a single point of contact, in terms of type of help we can have, but also in terms of data assets that you would want to get access to trials, you name it on the back of it. So Jeremy, Sven, Robin, and the team have really come, I think, a long way of trying to set that up across Novartis, including legal, including procurement. Now, at the same time, it's hard because it also means that a big learning was also to have to say no to many, because it's naturally exciting once you get the get-go on that and saying, yes, we want to work with many more startups, you get flooded to some extent. So how do you stay true to your core? And they almost reverse it the other way around. It's like, how do you put yourself in our shoes? How do you think about the main challenges and the main pain points we have? You think about the key launches that we have ahead of us and where you can insert some piece of the solution where we really have some gaps as part of it. On the data play, there are massive data plays to be had, massive data harmonizations to be had. Who can best help us on that? So it has been a long journey of also a lot of no's, but with the one that we work really equipping ourselves to be able to go and scale those together in a more streamlined way.
Yeah, so one of the things that I remember both Vas, when we first met him, I think it was actually before he actually was in the CEO role. He spoke 2 years ago. You, of course, Jeremy and the others of the team talked about you didn't want to view customer-vendor relationships. You wanted to think about them as collaborations. You didn't want to think about investor, GP, LP relationship. You wanted to think about collaboration. That really sounded great, but hard to believe. And yet, over the last 2 years, you've made it reality. The idea that you don't treat your collaborations as vendors or vice versa, and you don't treat the companies or organizations like StartUp that you invest in as just the investments do it for us. There's really a unique worldview that I think you and Vas and the team have executed on. Easy to say, I said, but execute on so well. What and why, I should say, do you think you've been successful at changing the mindset inside of Novartis, and especially with the partners that you now have over the last 2 years, and bringing them along for the ride?
You're right. I have a very natural aversion to vendor relationship because it's arm's length. It's often synonymous with big waterfall, slowness, massive teams, ill-defined definition of when you get it wrong, not adjusting. I'm coming from a world of 2 pizza teams at Amazon, where it's like, what's the minimum team setup that you get together? What are the complementary type of skills that you bring on that? So that's the nature of a partnership, truly of a partnership. And again, we see many people in these rooms upstairs have complementary skills that we don't have. So how do we bring those in? It's not easy to do. So we've been talking a lot about, and still are, about productization. I think we have some great beacons within the company now where it's starting to work. And it's a joy when you get that, when you see those product teams of 8, 10 people really going after it, iterating quickly. When it's no slides anymore, it's purely based on demos on a bi-weekly cycles. That's what gets me really going. And I would love to embed that everywhere we can. Vaz would love that as well. And so that almost to some extent, how do we aspire in 5 years to be more startup Novartis? Not only with startups, it's also the way we have set up the partnership, for example, with Microsoft, is with 3 different facilities where we are co-locating the team. We're very specific about the type of challenges that we're taking on. There is a portfolio of challenges we're taking on, but they are really organized along those lines as well with complementary skills. We have teams from Amazon, from AWS on the pitch with us, including in some of our manufacturing facilities. It's incredible to see the natural DNA of each being actually spreading from one to each other. That's incredibly valuable for us. It may sound soft, but incredibly valuable. Same at Tencent. The speed at which our team and Tencent are working together, figuring it out in some of the most complex challenges are really rewarding to see. So that's what we aspire to get to.
So I had the honor and privilege to come to Switzerland a few months ago for your leadership meeting with your top, it was like 200 leaders, 300 leaders around the world. And I was really blown away, pleasantly surprised, but blown away by how quickly the mindset shift took place within the organization and how digital at the finance level and every aspect of the organization has been completely transformed. What did you do inside of the very short period of time, that you really had done it to really be able to make the leadership team meeting from 2 years ago be radically different than the one you did this year in Switzerland?
Well, first of all, thank you, Steve, for joining us as well. I think there was some magic in the air on those 2-3 days. Maybe for the benefit of the audience, we do indeed a leadership team event once a year where we get our top 300 leaders all together. Usually, more traditionally, we would review the entire strategy, all the business planning, etc. And credit to Vas for that, being one of our, going big on data and digital being one of our top 5 priorities. We decided, you know what, let's give it a moment where we've made enough progress. We had a moment in time when we want to make it irreversible. How do we decide to make actually those 3 days entirely about that theme? So that was a decision at first, to say, first, it's one of our top 5 priorities globally. And 2 was to say, let's take the entire time, aside from the first hour that was on strategy, the 2.5 days were entirely around going big on data and digital. implicitly, it's more than that. It's also a cultural agenda. It's also the unboss movement that we cherish and we're really trying to
Unboss. Just explain that one piece, because I learned a lot when I was listening to the team that was there. Unboss and unbossing.
We believe that there is a lot of empowerment to be done among our team, especially in scientific teams where it's all based on learning, as opposed to we've been students of Microsoft from that, instead of know it all, moving to learn it all. How can we have a culture where we define some ground rules of the game, we define the boundaries of the tennis court, and then we let the team really operate in that. So what we call the unboss movement. Not something easy, by the way, because unboss doesn't mean anarchy. It means being comfortable to deal as well with complexity and dualities all the time as well about how you do your role. But we think the digital agenda comes naturally into the unboss movement that we're aiming to get to.
So there's an interesting thing. We've spent a lot of time, Unity and myself and a number of the team members, meeting with CEOs of pharma companies all around the world. And what's fascinating that we quickly learned many years ago, and I think it's even more true today, is whatever the CEOs and the teams are working on today is not necessarily going to affect the short term. It's actually a decade or two out. And at the same time, you're inheriting stuff that was from 10 or 20 years ago. Was there anything that you had to do from prior kind of Novartis to really make a radical shift for the 10-year kind of trajectory out? If I think about 2030, we talk about our big health moonshots by 2040, the UN Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. When you think about your tenure and Vas's tenure, we know that you kind of get a baton passed to you and you pass the baton. How do you think about that in terms of just your own legacy there, but also what you've had to kind of do to shift from where you got handed and what you want to hand off?
Yeah, I think it goes back to your question about the learnings. Is one of the main one we had fairly early on is like you can dream as much as you want about it, and including our type of moonshots, our big what if that you have been party to on that. If you don't have your foundation in the right place, it's not going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years. So a very first step we did was what I referred to earlier as the 12 lighthouses. So those were 12 infrastructure programs that we put in place. Those are not my programs. Those are programs that are held by the executive team overall. We are holding hands on those 12. We keep shaping them as well when we get it wrong. We killed a few where we got it wrong and we adjusted accordingly. But those are programs where we gave ourselves the freedom to say, we'll take the next 2, 3, 4 years to really invest in those. So we'll put the right capital. We'll put some of our very best brains as part of it. When do we need to complement it with the right partners as well to be able to make some of those happen? A lot of those are non-sexy pieces, like take our main initiative that we call Data 42, is how do we make sense of the 2 million patient years of clinical trial data that we have? That's pretty hard work on that. So how do we find the best partner to help us on that and really creating those data lakes and those foundations? How do we then invest in the right type of data set that could feed into that? And clearly as well, investment in talent. Where do we have gaps in talent on as we have 12 mega launches ahead of us, digital marketing, how do we invest massively in data science and AI because we know this is coming? And to be able to do what we're dreaming about, we need to have all those foundations and talent in place.
Yeah, it's definitely an exercise in both being patient for the long term, but disciplined on the short term to be able to make that happen. I think one of the things we outline as part of our core values and our mindset is this idea of long-term commitment, knowing that we don't choose partners and we don't hope to have partners to choose for short-term. And I think one of the things that's really interesting about Novartis and everybody around the Novartis ecosystem, I think, are playing in a very unique way, thinking about the future and playing an active role in shaping the conversations. As part of that, I want to open up and allow for there to be Q&A to you because I know there are people with questions for you. Yeah. So there's 2 microphones. If anybody has any questions, I'm going to take a couple as we wrap up. One kind of leading question to what I just explained is this idea of collaboration. What does it mean to you when I think about there's entrepreneurs in this room at all stages of development, many of you partnered with, many that want to partner with you, many that you're going to want to partner with. What would you want to say to them in terms of that comment you made earlier, it's not easy to work with us? What do they need to remember at every step of the way?
So I saw a few friends just while walking upstairs. I saw the founder, for example, of Doctor.com. I saw some Komodo Health and others. So really great partners. We've done 12 plus partnerships just last year alone on top of some of the big ones I was referring to earlier. To me, there are 2 sides to that. There is one which is, and that's hence the investment in the biome. How do we put ourselves into your shoes much more? So the close proximity, hence the investment in startup health is critical to us and being partners in the first place. But maybe a message to me the other way around that is easy maybe to underappreciate is the mirror of that is how do you put yourself into our shoes? So our teams are incredibly, it seems like a lot of people, 100,000 people, and it is a lot of people, but our teams are incredibly busy. They have, often it bounces from one department to the other. Often the problem is not well defined, and then by default, someone gets excited, but it doesn't really get the traction. And the danger is like a startup thinks, great, I'm working with Novartis, or I'm working with that big pharma, I'm in there, but if we cannot build traction together, it's an illusion. So my step one would be how together do we really define the 5-10 challenges that really matter? And for that, a practical invitation would be just, even on our annual report, just to look at, or in all of our statements, the type of launches we talk about. When you look at some of the ophtha launches we have, some in cardiovascular that we have right now, you can quickly get a sense of the typical pain points that we're going to have to go and launch those. We are quite vocal and transparent about those 12 lighthouses I was talking about. We can quickly see the things that will get massive momentum and on which we're putting meaningful budget and talent behind. So come and help us on those. If you come and help us on those and you really have solutions that help on those, the best will really find their place and will let you amplify yourself. And our commitment, I would say, to the room is that we'll say no to many, but once we come in, I think what we have to offer is not just even a national play or local play, is that if it works, and that's my absolute obsession coming from pilot to scale, is then how do we get you, if it works in the US, do we get you in France, in Spain, in Germany, in the UK? If it works on a few trials, how do we get that embedded across our portfolio of trials where it makes sense as part of it? So that's what we have to offer. But I'd love us to put ourselves in your shoes and you to put yourself in our shoes on the big problems.
Love it, love it. And I think the dozen companies in the Startup Health portfolio that have partnered with you have said time and time again, we got started and then it just expanded from there. So, you know, what you just described is exciting and thrilling. One question over here, and if there's one over here, yes.
Hi, Paulina Hannon, Portfolio Director of Startup Health. So I personally am really excited about your dozen partnerships with the companies and with the health transformers here. My question to you is, so we talked a lot about collaborations with the B2B side and how you're working with the ecosystem. How does Novartis think about really partnering and engaging with patients and with families, caregivers, nurses, the people who are really on the front lines?
Yeah, I'll take a very concrete example. I was referring to Doctor.com, and I don't know if the founder is in the room, but...
Andre and Rita, you guys here? They must be in one of the 2,300 meetings upstairs.
There was a very concrete example where we're launching, and Ronnie and the team working on this is in the room. The credit goes to them collectively. It was, look, you have 100,000 patients suffering from ankylosing spondylitis in the US, for which we have a drug that could be eligible for. How do we go about that together? How do we identify them? The problem statement in that case was, look, it takes 8 years for those patients to be on the right drug regimen. 8 years. So it means those patients are starting from primary care to trying to find their way, Dr. Google, then getting to a specialist, getting to another specialist, and there's a lot of inertia in the system. It takes a very long time. So there we looked at, okay, that's a simple but highly complex to go after problem statement. What we love is we launched a campaign called, or they launched a campaign called Pain in the AS, ankylosing spondylitis, and with Doctor.com, of finding what are the different partners we need to go and effectively identify those patients, activate them, having the right content, creating the right trigger, where can telemedicine help in that space? So it's not telemedicine abstract, it's more, once we have identified them, how can we effectively have a relationship pretty quickly, having the right content with our medical team and our commercial team on the back of that. And they managed to get, actually in no time, to get, if I'm not mistaken, 35,000 of the 100,000 eligible patients to get to that. That's very front line. You could apply that logic, back to my point earlier about finding the pain points, to pretty much all of the key drugs that we have. I have another example in mind, which is we have a drug in ophthalmology that we just launched, of which I'm very proud of, because my granddad, who is 97, is suffering from wet macular degeneration. It's an injection in there, and there the problem is different. The problem wasn't a complete patient experience you create. It was more, as soon as a patient gets into the doctor's office, the doctor gets a lot of choices among 3-4 different drugs. And there's a battle of the fridge. Those ophthalmologists can decide among those. They have to take the stock. They often carry for a couple of millions of dollars into the fridge. But they don't know if with us they are going to be reimbursed. So there we played, it was more a data play of who can help us almost in real time when the patient come in, for the doctor, for the HCP and the admin team to know that effectively they would be reimbursed if they administer a drug on that. So again, horses for courses on those, but really framing the problem and then the best partner to go and help us meet that. In that case, Komodo Health.
Excellent. Well, we're out of time. Bertrand, I want to thank you. The last 2 years have been a thrill and incredibly inspiring that you guys said something 2 years ago and you did what you said you were going to do, and have been a really terrific partners, not just to Startup Health directly, but these entrepreneurs in our portfolio companies, raving about everybody around the organization that, just like leadership does, talks in a very unique way for a pharmaceutical company, especially a long-standing one that I think has been historically more difficult to work with. And I think you've made a quick mindset shift with everybody that works with you. So thank you for your partnership. Thank you for coming here once again and giving us an update, sharing your learnings. We look forward to doing it again next year. And as you continue to share your learnings, hopefully it becomes more obvious to others about how intentional you're being and committed you are to transforming health and really making an impact on the health and well-being of everybody you serve. So thank you very much.
Thank you to you, and thank you to the room as well. And those, I mean, again, I find it mind-blowing that we have 2,300 basically one-to-one meetings happening upstairs. I think it's not, I've never seen, I've come in from several industries before, I've never seen something like this. This is incredible what you have created. I think the sense of purpose in health probably creates some of that as well, and the appetite naturally around that. Those type of moonshots as well is something really unique that you don't get in many industries, but it's kudos to the team, and thanks for pushing us to make those happen.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bertrand.